Good morning. All right. I want to talk about certain things. This is called many things. I had COVID. It's been 3 weeks. This freaking virus. I still got cold symptoms. I just got over aches and pains in my back and chest, and now my ear hurts for some reason. But I'm still a little bit stuffy and still having trouble sleeping. Still have GI symptoms, which is not pleasant. And I wanted to discuss a few things. My last video I had to set to private because I got a little angry, and name calling is something I do not want to put in my videos, or downing people. There's a recent uploading of a podcast on the internet circulating, and in that there was a lot of negative things said about things, and at the end it just seemed like the person was telling the other person that they should just give it up. There's nothing up there. My first thing is our law enforcement are some of the best law enforcement people out there. I've had to deal with, a Vernon police many times throughout my journey in life. And I have had them not believe me with certain things. And then other times it's like they have me drunk when I don't drink. It was my word against other people's words, so they don't know what to believe. And they've talked to me kind of funny. I've also dealt with them a lot, with my husband, who was abusive. And even though, they have a hard job to try to weed out what's fact, what's fiction, what's going on, especially with domestic disputes. Back in the day, from what I understand, and it's kind of nice to hear from a law enforcement that used to be back in the day, is they used to deal with, I guess, from what was said, domestic violence cases in the 70s were, just control your wife and whatever. My father's accident, basically my mother's accident, domestic abuse case. Charges were pending the outcome of my mother. She lived, so I guess the charges were dropped because he was charged, but then they dropped it for some reason. He never answered to what went on. My mother and my father were both guilty in that accident, and that was in 1970. So you have a lot of things that went on back then, with domestic violence. Now you got to be careful because both parties are arrested, a lot of times. But unless you have concrete evidence, they're not going to believe it's my word against yours and this and that and this and that. And then other people seem to like to get their nose involved in things that don't involve them. The only reason I involved myself in this is because I knew what the lake was like back in the day. And I've been talking to Tina, and I offered to help her because I have this YouTube channel, and she didn't know how to do a podcast of her own. Because there's a lot that have been speculated, and the emphasis has been put on one person when it's not just one person that they were dealing with back in the day. Since I've been talking to Tina, other things have came out, and we've been talking to the officer Well, the officer in charge of the investigation is getting the information. Now, I do have something written up, and anyone with information about that lake, especially, they are still looking for information. You can call the Connecticut State Police Eastern District Major Crime Squad Unit at 860-896-3237. Even if it's the littlest amount of information you can give. This case is still active, and they are still looking for anyone to come forward with information about anything, including the properties at Crystal Lake. In the, this is just a critique. People can like whatever they like, but in the video, they started on Wendell-owned property, and I'm going to say it because they said it. But then they moved on to Ellington-owned property in Crystal Lake. And where they dug was not owned by the Wendells, because that particular flowers around the trees and stuff was put there by Tina. She showed me where it was, and all anybody has to do is go online and see the Connecticut parcels. The LaRosa house is in the diamond shape thing. Okay, it's the one that's not hand drawn. That includes the properties owned by somebody who has not been mentioned in any podcast, and then Ellington land. The Ellington land is all in black. Now, if you're going to put a podcast out there and you're going to say who owns, if you can't get who owns the land that you're on right, how can anybody believe the rest of what you say? I know what they were doing. The well is the diamond-shaped thing that they searched and found the saddle shoes in. Up there is a ledge that's the size of a car. I used to write poetry on there, and then you go down diagonally to the LaRosa property, and the memorial sits where I kind of got the blue, the purple, and the yellow all intersecting. That's where it is. Now, that is Ellington-owned property, or property owned by the person on Cedar Street, and the property directly across from it, which is where the LaRosa house sat. None of that area is owned by the Wendells, and law enforcement probably didn't contact them back because they're not looking on the Wendell property any longer. They're looking on Ellington property. And the Wendells are nice people. I'm not going to down them or anything. I'm not even downing the person who did the podcast. He's doing what he has to do. I'm just saying, if you're going to get your land markers wrong on who owns the property that you're digging on, you're not digging on the right person's property. And hopefully, I don't know if they got permission from Ellington or the people who own the property directly adjacent to it to dig. But I don't understand how that's not hindering an investigation. However, that's for law enforcement to decide. They know about the podcast. They know about all of that. So I'm just, with this map, I'm showing you where the parcels are. The red circles are where my family used to own the properties. Oh, and I got the LaRosa house wrong. I'm sorry. It should be up more. It should be up where that blue square is. Okay, and that makes it even further up on Ellington property where they were digging at that memorial. So you got, it's really boggles my brain, why people do stuff like that. So basically, the case is still active. They are looking for anybody to come forward with information, anything, including the Ellington owned properties in Crystal Lake and, the adjacent property where the LaRosa house sat. Okay? I mean, there are wells all over there. And what I find unnerving is at the end of the podcast where they said there's nothing up there, and that's an answer. And it is an answer because there is nothing up there for you, and hopefully maybe this will stop you from digging around information. But it's not going to stop the law enforcement from digging around for information. And it shouldn't. And I don't think they are. You know why? Because if I called the police with this number and he got back to me right away, they're still interested in the case. They got back to me. I mean, he got back to me within a day. All right, of what I could tell him. And he got back to me within a day of me calling him recently with something else. So, the investigating officer from the Connecticut State Police Eastern District Major Crime Squad Unit is still interested in anything anybody has to say that is pertaining to what they can do on this land to try to find answers. Now, to me, it's very unnerving that somebody would try to make a family member of a missing person feel it's hopeless to look. She's not going to stop looking for her family member. Maybe she'll not include the other girls in further talks about these cases, but most of the cases were surrounding Susan LaRosa, who was found. Her search is for Irene LaRosa. Where is she? This is her aunt. And at the time that she disappeared up at the lake. Now, if we have to throw out all the other missing people and just concern ourselves with Irene, then we'll do that. Because, but I'm saying don't do that, only because if anybody has information with the other girls that's pertaining to anything that involved what went up on this lake, then the other girls need to be included. It's not hopeless to look for anything. We will find her. And if we find Irene and we happen to find the other kids that are missing, that's going to be great. That's a good thing. It's ridiculous to think the word competition was used when it concerns a human life. There's no amount of money you can put on somebody's life, and there's no competition when you're looking for somebody who's missing. That would be like forming a search party and then saying, okay, there's a competition to who finds them first. No, the main objective is we're going out and we're finding them. Doesn't matter who finds them first. So the word competition was thrown in there when it concerns a human life with police officers. And yeah, you know what? You're not in competition with the police officers because you're not in charge of this investigation. The Connecticut State Police Eastern District Major Crime Squad Unit is in charge of the whole investigation, not you. So why would you feel in competition with anyone? You're part of the search party that's going on. I'm part of the search party. The way I see it, the more people putting things out there, the more chances somebody will come forward with information. And there's no competition or race. Sometimes we need to just look, at a person's motive for doing things. Whether this is 1973 and they organized a search party, and people went out into the woods looking for somebody that's missing, or it's 2022 and we're doing videos, it's not a competition. It's more an organized search party for answers to help law enforcement, not to compete with law enforcement. It's a search party. You're involved in a search. You're not part of law enforcement. There's no ego. So I just view my videos as part of the search party, part of the getting answers. There's no competition. There's no race. We have the best law enforcement officers in the United States. They do their best with what they have to work with. If law enforcement doesn't contact somebody back, it's probably because they've exhausted all the answers that they are seeking from that person. Bottom line. They called me back. I gave them what I got. They don't need to talk to me anymore unless something else comes up. Am I going to go and further hinder their investigation? No. I will put something out there in a video. It's part of the search party. It's not part of doing law enforcement's job. I don't view myself as doing their job. Sometimes we need to step back and reassess why we're doing things, what our motivations are. Because no matter how good of intentions we have, it could get in the way of what they are doing. Now, I gave law enforcement everything I can give. They probably have more information from a family member of mine. I don't need to know what the family member told them. Neither does anybody else. That's for law enforcement to have that information, not anybody else, and especially not an actor or a self-proclaimed detective. You're an investigative journalist. Stick to your job. Journalist. If that's what you want to call yourself. And I'm not gonna, like I said, the last one I downed, so I don't want to down. The officer that is now in charge of the case, not past, not the ones that didn't find answers, not the ones that didn't come up with anything. The officer that is now in charge of the case is more than approachable. He's very nice. He's easy to talk to. He, likes the short answers, and he does care. And honestly, with the podcast, it was like, what do you think is going to happen if you down our law enforcement publicly to millions of people? They're going to be afraid to come forward with what they know. Even if it's the family members that are carrying the message from the people that used to live up there that are passed away right now. They're going to be afraid to go to law enforcement. Why do you want them to fear our law enforcement? Our law enforcement cares. So the officer that is now in charge of the case, he's a very nice man. He keeps things short and he keeps it directed to what he needs to find out because he's very busy. And guess what? He does care about it. Like I said, both times I called, he's called me back. So please do not hesitate to call, no matter what anyone else says, even on a podcast, about our law enforcement, because the one that is working the case now is very easy to talk to. We need to change the narrative on this. Instead of putting the message out there that it's hopeless, there's nothing up there, I did all the work, it's, let's put it to, we will find them. We will find them. Now, like I said, it's been said, if we have to take all the other girls out of it and just focus on Irene, we will. But I don't think that does any of those cases justice if there's a possible link to them. Like I said, there's no competition. We're just all part of the search party at this point. There's a lot of twisting and turning and assumption, you know, putting it out there. We started on this land, but then you never said you went on Ellington land after you went on the other land. You also mentioned the fact that, well, if a person's going to dig and it's going to be haphazardly, you know, they're not going to dig down deep into the ground because they're going haphazardly. And this is about the inches down that they would go. You know what? The people in question actually used jackhammers up there because it's all ledge. And they dug down deep. Because it's been said that there was one digging going on, and it has nothing to do with, I don't think it has anything to do with the girls, but they kept hitting water so they couldn't go down any further. So you know they are getting pretty deep. And it was brought out that why do you want to even dig when you have all these wells you can just throw them in? The wells could have been covered up by cement. They could have been covered up by dirt. They're deep. You never know. You never know if you got all the wells, because there's a lot of wells up there. There's a lot of overgrowth up there. That's what I wanted to get out with that. I can say all this stuff. I'm not under contract and I'm not under oath and I'm not doing anything. My motivation isn't to hurt anybody or their reputation, but just to put it out there, the right information pertaining to what is going on with these cases. All those in blue that say PR, they're privately owned properties that the names were not used on any podcast or any forum. And I'm not going to put their names out there. But if you see, the property with Ellington line ends way down, going past Cedar Street. So once you get past Cedar Street on that Ellington land, it's all Ellington land, all the way up to Pine Street, except for where you have privately owned properties. And anybody can go on and see the parcels. You know, there's a place you can see who owns the land. It's not that hard to do. I don't feel good. I did another podcast where I got angry because I really care about my friends and I care about Irene and where she's coming from. And to try to shut her up when her family member is missing, that's wrong. That's just wrong. Yes, they found Susan. Yes, you know, anybody knows that when you have a person come up missing, a lot of times it's the spouse that did it. But what other people don't know is how many hands were in the pot at that time, and there's other people that are suspects. Bottom line. And those people that are suspects shouldn't be surprised that they're still suspects, because especially when you put yourself at 3 of the crimes. You need a heart. And when I let Tina talk, it's because she has to say things that she needs to get out. I interjected in my videos because I got the information wrong. And I talk to Tina every day, and I have notes and stuff, and I still got the information wrong. Now, I'm not going to claim to sit there and not do that all the time. I do that a lot. But it's so easy to get the information wrong, so you got to let the person who's actually involved in it talk. And not just use what you feel you can use. Unless, of course, you are law enforcement and you're writing a report. They're trained to do that. And yes, it's been on my mind. I dreamt about the land again last night. I have dreams about this land all the time. It's not always about whatever. But, you know, they change something in the land. I'll dream about it. Go up there and it's changed. I have a special connection with this land. It's gorgeous up there. And hopefully the dynamics of the peoples have changed. And what goes on. In other news, there's a lot of coronavirus going on. I have a friend whose mother is in the hospital right now in Texas. And the day after she went into the hospital, she had asked for her neighbors or friends to check and ask her son Skip, George Skip, to bring her some clothes and stuff. And when they went into the apartment to get him, they found him dead in the apartment. And the sister, who is my friend, is up there, and her nearest cousin is an hour away, so she's up there trying to help Ma. And I haven't cried so much in my whole life. Well, I have, but the problem I'm having with Skip's death is that his body was still serving him purpose. Whereas the other deaths I've had in my life, including my husband, who was 50. Skip was, I think, 49. My husband had cancer. His body was riddled with cancer, and he was sick and dying. And his body wasn't serving him purpose anymore. But with Skip, I don't know anything about any of that, because I wasn't living there, in Texas. So I've been a little depressed with that. My daughter is doing okay. My cats are doing okay. Um, Me, I'm just this virus lingers. It's really getting old. It's been 3 weeks and I'm still stuffy again. Yeah, I wasn't stuffy, then I'm stuffy. Last couple days I've had aches and pains, my back and chest, but those are gone. Now it's the left side of my head where my ear is, lots of pressure and pain. So that is going on now. A lot of pressure and pain. So, anyways, that's that. It's just the way things are, I guess. That's the way I feel. And it's not to sit there and tell anybody not to listen to anything. It's, by all means, listen. So, yeah. You can, like I said, I view everything that's out there. Mike Bouchard, which Mike Bouchard's podcast is really good. I like it. He's abrasive like the cops that I always watch on TV. He's got that side to him, which that's what I like about him. Um, and he puts out information that you don't hear about in the other podcasts, or that differ than the other podcasts. So, one of the Annie that Tina talked about, Annie Oakley, there's a podcast where somebody's talking to her sister. And sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to talk to these family members one on one without trying to interject what your opinion is or, form the narrative. Just let them talk about their family's cases. I think I like hearing the family members talk more than I like hearing an actor talk or a person who's narrating it talk. It's more real to me. I have plans. I don't know where I'm going to go with a couple other things. We're done with Irene's podcast, or unless something else comes up, and Tina wants to talk about that. My thing is let Tina talk. And let's find these girls. And if we have to leave girls out of it, the reason why she doesn't leave girls and they out is because she is the one that talked to the family member, that gave the tips, that the investigative officers actually even went up to Ellington with, that contacted the Wendos, that did any of that. And she was on the phone with law enforcement with that. I don't know how many people understand that. That's what went on. And they weren't talking about the other girls at that point. If you listen to what Tina had said, they were just discussing Irene. He is the one to say those girls, with the plural, they, them, we, us. Nobody coerced this man to say any of that. He's the one that came out and said that. She was just talking about Irene. So he never said if she was anywhere if so-and-so ever did anything. It was always in the context of they, them, these, plural, us, we. I don't know how to stress. That's the reason why these other girls are put into this case. That's one of the bottom lines with it. I give Tina a lot of credit. She's got a lot of balls. Especially when she's facing somebody that seems to be pushing against her so hard and not liking her and people not liking her. Doesn't matter whether you like somebody or not. They have a missing family member. They're on that they're on the same page. And it's bothering me. It has nothing to do with me. It's somebody else's family. It's, you know, what it has to do with me is I know the land up there, and my families did hang out with those families. So my family is on the list of some of the stuff she has. But it bothers me about somebody trying to discourage her to further her search for her own family member up at that lake. 'Cause that's where it happened, if it happened anywhere. Up at the lake. Have a good day and an even better tomorrow. This is Marie signing off. Goodbye.